Welcome to The Circle. This is Ruptures and Roots, and I'm your fellow traveler, Joshua Swenson. This is a space for deep listening and the sharing of stories of rupture and transformation in unprecedented times, and the life that roots into the cracks. Sitting in the circle with me today is my dear friend, Sungil. We've known each other for nearly 2 decades and first met as brothers of the religious group we were both raised in. Since leaving that community, we have reconnected as brothers on our paths of healing and soul awakening. Welcome to the circle, Sungil. I'm honored to be holding space for your story today. Is there anything more you'd like to share by way of introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. Happy to be here. I feel like you covered the essence of what's important to intro. I'm sure people will learn more about me as I talk.
Thank you for sharing. Before we open the space for your story, I'd like to invite us both to begin with a brief check-in. How are you arriving today? In a few words, how are you feeling in mind, body, and spirit?
Well, this is very new for me. I've never been on a podcast before and never been in a public place where it's so unknown who is watching or listening. So I feel very vulnerable, but I'm okay with that and happy to be here still. And despite that, I feel pretty at ease.
I'm feeling a little nervous. This is my first time recording. I'm also excited. I've been doing a lot of work on preparing this platform and exploring this possibility in the last few weeks. And it's really exciting to see it manifest. And I'm also feeling a lot of gratitude for you, Sungil, showing up to help me test the ropes and try this out. So, yeah. So appreciate your presence here today. Yeah, I'd like to invite us both to ground and share a breath for a moment. Whenever you're ready, you're welcome to step into your story. What was life like before the rupture, or wherever feels right to begin?
Wow. Well, I actually feel this is a incredibly relevant question for me this week, because I've recently been doing a lot of work revisiting my life and my path, and yeah, I guess to give a little bit of context, I think what I consider my big rupture in my life was a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I took a big risk in leaving my job without anything lined up and starting to do some work with a plant medicine guide, which was a huge deviation from my previous patterns in life. I grew up, as you know, Joshua, but as people may not know who's listening, grew up in a religious movement that was a very high control environment, very conservative, and where there was a lot of limitations on exploration of various things. And there were a lot of things that were taboo, and for a lot of various reasons, I leaned into a lot of those frameworks and controls for a big portion of my life. And as I started to disconnect from those, maybe a decade ago, it took some time for me to really start to disconnect, because I was still, it was a long process of getting in touch with myself again. I feel like I really lost myself, especially in my late teens and 20s. And, I did a decade of talk therapy, and even though it was very slow moving, I feel like it was very important for me because I didn't have words to describe what was going on. And I needed that practice of slowly, painstakingly learning how to express what was going on. But it wasn't enough. COVID was really tough. I have 2 kids, and we had our second kid first kid right before COVID, second kid during. I moved. I got a house right before COVID. I moved my parents in with me, and all of that. I got a new job and got promoted. I became a manager. My wife was having postpartum depression and going through a hard time, and lots of factors that really pushed me to a breaking point. And it took me several years to get to the point where I had the courage to do something about it. And the first step for me was getting the courage to leave my job. And that took a long time to get to. Kind of ironically, the company I was working for provided a coaching service, and I was using that coaching service to navigate leaving the job. But yeah, I finally got to a place where I was like, no, I can't take it anymore. I need a drastic change in my life. I need to take a big risk. You know, without a big risk, nothing's going to change enough in my life. And so that's what led me to my rupture. And it actually started with you, Joshua. I know we kind of fell out of touch for a few years during what I call my crucible years.
Yeah.
But I held on to, you know, the path that you've taken and how powerful it seemed to have been for you. And that was my like Hail Mary, you know, I just reached out to you and I was like, all right, here's something drastic. Let's just go for it. And you were very kind to offer your experience, and you pointed me to the person I work with now. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And starting the work with my guide, that was really the point where my life started to turn around. The big rupture for me.
Yeah, that feels really, just I can resonate with so much of that, finding getting trapped into the life that you were leading and on the path that you were on. We just like get stuck in these ruts. So hard to shift course. And I'm just deeply honored that when you sent that message, I forgot it was a text message or something, but when we began the conversation of, helping you find a guide. And I have a very vivid memory of receiving your first message after your first journey. And from that point on, so much gratitude and appreciation for the ways that we've been connecting. And so I'm eager to hear how that was for you, and what was that turning point? What was the rupture? I mean, we talked about the life before. You've begun to talk about the rupture. How did the transformation go? Yeah.
In some ways, I feel like the rupture is still happening, but I also feel like in some ways it'll continue to happen for the rest of my life. But the first journey I did, that text I wrote you was a very emotional text, and I felt so much gratitude to you, and I still do. And it was just, I felt like the state I went into the journey was this state of just closed up, hard shell, unable to access like anything really below the surface. Even stuff on the surface felt like, it was hard to access sometimes. And I knew that I just had a lot that I needed to access. Like I didn't know what it would look like, or I mean, I guess I had some sense of what it would look like, but I didn't know how it would feel. And I didn't know what it would be like to actually go in there. But the first journey, it was like somebody threw like 1,000 sticks of dynamite into a huge dam, and a lake just came pouring out. And it was, the whole weekend I was just like crying and journaling, and I tried to like go on a hike and I couldn't even get out of the car because I was crying so much. It felt so cathartic to cry. I couldn't cry for years. I just couldn't let myself cry for years, and I was holding on to all of that, and then it just started to pour out. And from there, it was just an ongoing, like, it was just this like, yeah, this expanse opened up, and I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot to explore here, and I'm really excited for the first time to actually explore and get to know myself. I was depressed for years. I was just like, I mean, I guess I never really got suicidal, but I was very depressed. I felt incredibly stuck in my life and in the decisions that in some way I felt were made for me, but I held myself responsible. And and yeah, starting to do this work, it was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff I can work with here and a lot of stuff I can dive into. And so it felt very exciting. And I was like, oh my God, there's this whole world that I want to explore within myself, and using these medicines to help me get there. And then I started, experimenting with some of the different medicines, and they hit me in a lot of different ways and brought up a lot of things for me, and, pushed me back into that depression really hard. I was forced to just face it. I was forced to just like sit with it and get a really hard look at it over time. And it took a long time for me to sit with it. But I mean, the rupture, like, I really feel like the last year and a half, so much of my world has just been turned upside down, and it's been like confusing and exciting and painful and beautiful. And like, I've opened up a lot to my friends. I've opened up a lot to you, and just sharing about the pain that I've held on to. I've honored my what's authentic for me, and even if it's hard to say or it's hard for people to hear, like, I try to be sensitive best I can, but also like I'm giving space for myself. And that's a huge shift for me, because I feel like in my relationship with my wife and my family and friends, it was always like just putting down whatever I was feeling to make space for what the people around me were feeling and needed. And so, giving space for myself was incredibly disorienting. And it was like, it was also new, it was like I'm getting to know my 3-year-old self for the first time. And, my younger parts, all these aspects of my life and my experience that I just have never tapped into.
Yeah. There's a lot that stood out for me in what you just shared. One of them being this interior expanse that you have opened up into. And I've experienced similar kind of like revelations that like, wow, look at all that's down here under the surface of who I think I am. All these wild emotions and, forbidden longings and all of it. And yeah, that's why I thought to name my guidework site Interior Expanse. And I feel like it's just like characterizes so well, when you open into this space, especially, both of us. I think what's interesting is both of us have coming from this place, being raised in this high control religious setting, that drugs were bad. And so I hadn't done anything. I'd maybe done a little, consumed a little alcohol when I was in my mid-20s, but really didn't take a liking to it. I didn't really start to like drugs until I discovered psychedelics. And I just approached them from this intentional way. Like, I had read Michael Pollan's book, I'd watched, Fantastic Fungi. And so there's this invitation into like, these are medicines. These are sacred medicines that can open you and heal you, and lead you on a journey of transformation. And So, I just feel a lot of resonance with your path, and yeah, and honoring that intention that you bring to this work,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you, because you seeded me with a lot of content to get me started on understanding what this path means and how to treat it with reverence, and treat the drugs, the medicines, with reverence. And not to and I felt like it was natural for me as well. I feel like it was very in line with my personality, but it took some getting used to. And I came from the same place as you. I had only smoked weed a couple times, but never done anything before. And so it was, yeah, I mean, that that first journey I did was with MDMA, and after the come on, and I worked through the wave of that. I was just in this state of like complete bliss and freedom,
Mm.
and I couldn't believe that that was possible.
Mm.
I couldn't believe it was possible to feel unencumbered. And then that just took me down this whole route of like, oh my God, what are all the things that are preventing me from feeling this?
Mm.
And that's been my guide. I've just been like looking at all of the pain and just facing it and trying to like confront what is deep down in there. My guide has helped me a lot in helping me to frame that and face the darkness within you or within me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's been amazing.
Mm.
And I love the name of your practice too. I always resonated with that.
Thank you. Yeah. I also, you've been naming parts and your inner child, your 3-year-old self, and I think people who it's very popular within this spaces of healing, and especially with these kind of sacred medicines, to become acclimated with some type of parts work. Can you speak to your experience with that, and what modalities you've worked with and all of that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my introduction to parts work was through IFS. My guide had been
What is
trained.
that? Sorry.
Oh yes, yeah. IFS is internal family systems.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It was started by a guy named Dick Schwartz, or Richard Schwartz, and he's still very active. He still comes out with new material, and he publishes new books and stuff, deepening the framework of IFS. But so my guide was trained a bit in IFS, and I was just very curious about it. I was like, okay, if I'm going to work with you, I'm going to learn myself about your modality. And so I read one of Dick Schwartz's books, and at first it really spoke to me, and it's still, I think for me, the framework of understanding myself as a collection of parts is really foundational to how I approach myself and approach working with the energies within me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that people have a lot of different ways to describe it. And I feel like they're all the same. They all speak to the same thing that's happening. It's just different interpretations based on each person's experience in life. But yeah, I haven't like indexed too heavily on the framework of IFS in the work that I've been doing. I've been holding it very lightly and just holding that general concept of myself as a collection of parts and tapping into a deeper wisdom, which Dick refers to as capital S self, that shows up with compassion and curiosity and connectedness. He has these 8 C's that he talks about. And so that general framework has been really foundational to how I can make sense of all this work.
Yeah. Was that surprising for you to kind of like begin to discover that?
Oh yeah, I was hugely skeptical at the beginning. I was like, "What is this IFS junk? It's just another cult." Like, I was so that was a whole thing for me. I had to work through like the risk of getting sucked into another cult or another like religious ideology or something.
Yeah.
And then that flipped relatively quickly for me, because I realized, it's just a tool. It's not something I have to base my whole life on. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
But that was, part of my journey of working through religious trauma.
Mm. Yeah, I resonate with that, man. Like I recently went on this journey that was facilitated by a dear friend of mine, Adam. And he has this work called Wild Discipline, and he's bringing fathers and sons together to do rites of passage and to heal their wounds and to repattern their relationships. And it's really beautiful, man. It's like, yeah, my dad, 70-year-old guy, on coming back on his own spiritual journey right now. Yeah, maybe I should have him on at some point. That'd be fun. Anyways, my dad decided to join me on this journey, and so there's 3 months leading up to this retreat that we went on, and it was a backpacking and then like rites of passage, kind of like men's work stuff happening while we were out in the wilderness. And there was just a lot that came up for me in allowing myself to be guided. I think for me, there's all these like red alerts that go off anytime I get this like, oh, this is kind of like a cult, or like these are cultish tendencies. Yeah. I'm not going to let myself be a follower, so it took some work for me
radar is strong.
Yeah, it took some work to like allow myself to really like trust the container and trust Adam as a guide. And it ended up being really beautiful once I was able to finally let my guard down. And so I appreciate you naming that skepticism. I think that's a part that I'm working with. There's like this part that's like another protector part of mine. I think this like judge that judges and is keeping an eye out for me to not fall into a similar kind of situation, and sees those patterns all around me everywhere in the world we live in. So yeah, I think that's important to name that. And so I respect your like, diligence in, in following through with this work and holding it lightly. Yeah, I'm wondering if that pattern has any, how that pattern has played out in your relationship with the guide that you've been working with.
Yeah, I was going to say that's something I continue to work through with him. I feel like I reached the point at least 3 times in the last year where I was like, I need to start working with someone else. Like I was just like looking at him, and I realized eventually I was looking at him how I was trained to look at the leader of our religious movement. Which is in an idolizing way, in a way that like, oh, they've got to be perfect, right? Because they have all the answers. And so I was just like, I was trying to find every flaw in him. I was like finding every reason why I should be working with someone else. And it was very hard. It was, like whenever I was in the medicines, it was a lot more easy to trust because that's, I think, a byproduct of, the effects of some of the medicines. But afterward, and in the follow up, the integration work, the ongoing like regular consciousness work, there was a lot of resistance, and I still feel that sometimes. I still feel like has he helped me all he can help me? And do I need to be looking for someone else or something else? And I've learned to hear that and then reassure that voice by saying, you know what? No matter who I work with, what I do, who I engage with, the work is here. The work is in me. And that's what matters the most. And sure, maybe some people might be able to support me in ways that will really accelerate some of the healing, but there's no rush. I can just work through it at my own pace. And right now I've been incredibly blessed to work with him and feel like I've benefited a lot. And, things might be changing, and maybe I will find someone else to work with, and maybe my relationship with him will change. But I'll always be incredibly grateful for everything that he's done for me.
Sending gratitude out to your guide.
Yeah.
And a lot of respect.
Yeah.
referred a number of people to him, and they've all had really incredible experiences. And I'm really, yeah, it's just so happy to see how much has come from that relationship, you and him. And yeah, I also really appreciate you naming this. There's no rush. Like, I think for me, I'm the kind of person who, when I discover something that I'm really kind of like get excited about, I just go for it. And in my, over the course of the last few years, when I began to explore psychedelics, I was really going for it. You know, and I was charting the path. I'd not seen anybody kind of break away from our, community in that way. I didn't even know where I could get mushrooms. Once I decided that I wanted to try exploring them. Yeah, I just I think I like to think that I gave myself, I had to experience the reckless adolescence that I never let myself experience when I was younger, because I had to grow up too quickly to take care of my parents and to be an elder brother in our church community. And it was just, it was chaotic, and it was reckless. Like, I had a young daughter, 2-3 years old, I think, when I started exploring. And, my partner had never, we both were raised in this community. So, she was a little suspicious and wary about the medicine. And I felt like I really had to go this way. And so I had to like really push for it and chart my way into new communities and relationships and practices. And I think that I went a little fast at times. Now I've arrived at a much more sustainable pace. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for naming that. There's no rush, and I also like to think of this quote from Bayo Okomolafe: "The times are urgent. We need to slow down." Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And by the way, I really, on a personal level, I really appreciate that you paved that path for me, because, that you going over that hurdle first made it so much easier for me to cross the threshold, and for me to work out that dynamic in my relationship with my spouse, who had the same reservations. So I really, really appreciate everything that you have shown me, and, gone first in this path and helped me along the way.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. It's so exciting to have somebody to be journeying alongside and to be sharing sharing things with, sending podcasts and books, and I feel like we're really kind of propelling each other now. So and showing up in this space is another example of that. And yeah, we've already begun to sort of like turn into this, like make the turn from rupture into roots. And so I just wanted to put a little seed question out there for you. How have you been showing up differently after the rupture? I know that the rupture is ongoing, but like, how have you been showing up differently in your relationships, or, personally in your life?
Wow. I love that question. For me, the biggest theme that came out of my journey work from the beginning was this theme of navigating all the controls that were placed on me in my life. All the controls from the religious upbringing, from society, just all the ways that like I felt programmed to be a certain way, to show up, and especially to show up in a certain way as a parent. My wife and I were very into things like sleep training, and a lot of things that I now look at and see how we were so like pressured to feel that way, but it wasn't really honoring what was true for us and how we wanted to show up. By the way, are you still there? Your video's frozen for me.
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you. I can see you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the biggest change for me was I started to question all those controls. I started to look at the way that I was parenting our kids, and I was like, why do I care so much about when they go to sleep? Why do I care so much about like the way that they eat? Why do I care so much about all these little behaviors that seem so important? And then I started to just take a really hard look at all those things and just kind of like, I mean, not systematically, but like as they showed up in my life, I just started to take a look at them. And I was like, I told my wife, I was like, look, I don't want to do this thing anymore. Can we just leave it open ended? Can we just let the kids choose? Can we just like, and that was a major change. It took, I'm really grateful that my wife came along with me on that ride. It took her, she was maybe a few steps behind me sometimes, but she was willing to try new things. And we transformed how we parent the kids so much. And it was so clear in how they showed up every day. They were feeling less anxious. They were acting out less. Don't get me wrong. They still are kids and they still have lots of big feelings. But it felt like we were allowing them to be more of themselves. And that was amazing to me. Later on, after, that was kind of the first major change. After that, I really started to take a hard look at my relationship with my wife and my relationship with my parents. And those were really hard. And, there's still hard, there's still aspects that are really hard, but it was really hard to really come to an acceptance that there were some really unhealthy dynamics there. And if I was going to honor what I really felt, I was going to have to put up some big boundaries. And I would say those are probably still some of the most transformational things that I've done in the last year since my rupture was, I put up a major boundary with my wife that was very hard to do. And it actually transformed our relationship amazingly. I put up a big boundary with my parents. I recently asked them to move out and they're going to be moving out in 2 weeks. And it's been incredibly hard, but it's been also, I felt a very profound inner peace knowing that I'm honoring my authentic self and not blurring the boundaries of what is my responsibility and what is the responsibility of others. That was a really hard thing for me to undo. And I'm still undoing it in many ways, but that was, something that was really programmed in me. And I think a lot of people that grew up in our church was this like, we need to take responsibility for the world. We need to go save the world. And the way to love people is by denying yourself and, giving unconditionally. And undoing that has been incredibly hard, but also probably the things that have allowed me to feel more at home with myself more than almost anything this year. And I feel those were some of the really major ways that it's come through, but that authenticity shows up in so many smaller ways too. I'm like learning so deeply in myself the power of speaking from authenticity, from an authentic place. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's almost like uncanny, like when you dig deep and you face what you're feeling in there, and then you sit with it, and then you act from an authentic place. It's like you always, there's like balance that's restored for you and for the others in the situation. And I feel like I'm still learning that, but it feels like such a deep wisdom about life that I was just never told,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. Wow. Yeah, and I so respect that journey and the steps you've taken to make those boundaries. I think one word that came to mind was codependence. And I remember having this realization that, like, especially with my parents and with my family of origin, I realized I wasn't experiencing love there. I was experiencing codependence. And to me, that meant, like, there was not a place of, I couldn't be authentic. I was always sort of wearing a mask. I was always, like, on guard. I was always very attuned to how everybody was reacting, responding, and kind of catering to their needs over mine. Sort of doing everything I could to make sure others were taken care of over myself. And I there was no space for me to be who and how I was. And I likewise had to set some hard boundaries, which in retrospect also maybe were a little extreme. I in my mind, I had to decide for myself that these people are no longer my parents. And I even told my parents that. And my sisters, I had to say, like, this is not my family, because I just couldn't be who I was. I would come away, and I was also, a big part of my journey was, like, attuning to my body and the way that I hold trauma, tension, emotions in my body. And I was very aware of how tense I was after any time I saw my parents. And fortunately for me, my parents have been very involved and supportive in raising our children. They offer childcare daily, pretty much, and they are just incredible grandparents. And I began to see them in just so much gratitude for the ways that they're showing up for my kids, and deep affection for them. And so I was like, I made this switch with, like, they're not my parents, but they're my daughter's grandparents. So I thought of them that way. And through my daughter and through my love, our mutual love for our daughter and my son, I really have come back into deep community with them. And my parents and I and one of my sisters have done some medicine journeys together, which also really helped us repair and release those patterns that we had been holding. So hearing you putting up those boundaries and, like, saying the hard truths of how you feel, when you're living in this, like, this codependent way, it can feel like, to set those boundaries, you have to push back hard to the place where there are appropriate boundaries, right? And then you can begin that process of repair. So I'm honored by I'm honoring your courage to, to make set those boundaries and hold true to
thank you, Joshua.
yourself. Yeah.
And every time I hear about you doing the work with your family, there's always a part of me that grieves. My family is definitely not there. But I'm very happy for you that you have that as a resource.
Yeah. And another thing that stood out for me in your story was this, like, how you're showing up with your children. And I remember feeling like when I first held my daughter in the first few months of her life, there was, like, this wall between me and this primordial being of pure emotion and, life and vitality, that there was something that was blocking me from really deeply connecting with her. And I'm curious, yeah, how the medicine has helped you. You shared a little bit, but like, how are you seeing yourself come to life in your relationship with your children?
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's a huge one for me. And I feel making those changes, questioning the controls and the norms, the societal norms, all the things that I had just kind of taken for granted has led me to a place where I feel so much more present with my kids. Like when they are acting out, or when they're even like, angry at me and beating me up, and like I can sit there for them. And not always, sometimes I get activated a lot, but a much higher percentage of the time I'm able to just sit there with them, and with the feelings that are coming up, and
Mm,
let them be and express themselves how they need to express themselves. Because I feel so much of the pain of not having been able to express myself. I don't know exactly. I don't know how it was in your family growing up, but I really internalized this message that like being angry is not okay, and even like almost like being sad is not okay. Like if you're
mm,
sad, there's something to be fixed.
mm-hmm,
And it was like, I mean, the first line of our religious text was like, the purpose of life is joy, right?
mm,
And I internalized that as, oh, we got to be happy all the time. And so I felt like I was never allowed to express a whole spectrum of my experience.
mm,
And I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be able to be fully human and have the experience of all the spectrum of their emotion, and also learn that actions have consequences.
mm-hmm.
And like all the natural laws of how life works. Um, so I feel that the work has completely transformed how I show up with kids, and it's shown a lot in how they show up with me too.
Mm,
I feel a lot more connected with them. I feel I'm so grateful that they can share when they're feeling a lot, when they're feeling upset, when they felt like they were wronged by somebody at school. They can tell me things that like I would never have told my parents as a kid. And I feel so grateful that my path has led me to this point, and that they're able to do that.
mm. That's so beautiful, Sungil. And I just, yeah, I just think like what comes to mind is like how this work is not just about you. It's not just about me. Like every journey I've taken is like, I feel it rippling, I see it rippling in the way you live, the people, how you're showing up with your kids, with your partner, with your
Mm-hmm.
friends. And so
Yeah.
this work is generational work, you're
Yeah.
healing yourself so that stuff doesn't get passed down, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And through the process, I've also come to have a lot more compassion for my parents. I still feel very disconnected, and it's very hard for me to connect and share with them, but I feel a lot more compassion for them. And I also feel very grateful to myself for doing the work, and for, changing the pattern. And hopefully my kids, of course they're going to have their own trauma that they're going to have to work through, but hopefully I won't be the source of most of their trauma,
Mm.
you know? And of course, I'm a parent, so of course there's going to be some degree of trauma that's passed down, but I do feel like I'm changing the pattern.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. Thank you for that work. Thank you for that work.
You
Yeah,
too,
man.
man.
Yeah. Um, yeah, as you're rooting deeper, how have you been anchoring yourself in practices, relationships, and truths?
I feel like I'm still doing a lot of rooting myself, but I have been, some of the practices that have really been, I feel like they're changing my inner landscape, has been listening to books. books that expand my consciousness and completely change the way that I look at things.
Mm.
Um, I've been going, I'm still not working. I'm still very happily unemployed. And I go on a lot of hikes. I spend a lot of time in nature. I've been trying to get more active, change some of the behaviors and patterns. I have tried to do a lot more meditation, but I still have a hard time with meditation specifically, just sitting still. But I've learned other ways of becoming aware of what's going on within me,
Mm.
and those have been incredibly powerful for me. And each time I do a plant medicine journey, I feel like I just dive deeper into it. I feel like it's just this. I guess it is kind of a rooting process. I kind of look at it as this like expansion and contraction, and each time you can expand a little bit more and a little bit more, and
Mhm.
expand in different shapes and different ways. But I guess you could also look at it as roots. They're little tendrils of roots that are like going deep within me and establishing themselves. And I feel it shows up in how I look at myself and how I show up in my relationships. Um, I feel like I have a lot more of a sense of who I really am and where my place is. Of course, it's still a work in progress, but so much more than I did 2 years ago.
Mm.
So I feel, the practices for me that have helped me to establish those roots. I mean, a big one is just allowing myself to be heard. I spent so much of my life hiding and hiding what I was feeling and hiding who I was. And I think a huge part of my roots going down is just allowing myself to be heard in many different contexts, in one-on-one conversations with friends, in group settings with friends, in, new settings with new people, doing this. Geez, I
Mhm.
would never have done this 2 years ago. And each time I take a step into that practice of like trying to show up more
Mm.
authentically and looking deeper within myself, whether I'm by myself or with other people, I feel my roots going down deeper.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I also resonate with that. You are saying like this expansion and contraction, and we've both resonated with each other in periods where we're both in this contraction phase, and then we're in
Yeah.
phase of expansion. I like these words, involution and evolution, or like
Mm.
the yin being this period of being in that yin energy of reflection and introspection, going inward. And when you're in that space, sometimes you can feel more cranky. Sometimes it can feel more like, I've done all this work on myself and here I am again. But inevitably, it cycles back into the evolutionary
Yeah.
period of growth and expansion, being in the yang
Yeah.
energy. And,
Yeah.
so I feel like there's that, the cycling,
Yeah.
honoring the cycles, honoring and also earlier you mentioned this, like, you don't have to rush, we have to keep reminding ourselves. It's so hard to remind yourself when you're in that involutionary period that like, yes, this
Yes.
is part of the
Yeah.
process. This is part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My guide has an analogy that's been extremely helpful for me, which is it's like a spiral, but it's like a 3D spiral moving in a certain vector. Like from one angle, it looks like you're just going in circles. But if you look at it from another angle, you can see each time you come back to the bottom, you've changed
Mm-hmm.
and you're different. You're a different person than you were at the previous bottom. And that's been extremely helpful for me as a reminder that, oh, okay, yes, I can see the ways that I've changed, even if I feel extremely frustrated that I'm still coming back to the same place in a certain way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. What is emerging in your life now? What new
Oh,
possibilities or visions are you leaning into?
wow. Well, I feel a lot of movement lately. Um, so I have started a guide training program, and um, I'm in this place where I'm still unsure about where I'm going to be at the end of it, and whether that's going to be something that I pursue or not. But I'm really enjoying being in that space of not knowing, and really appreciative of all the transformation that's happening in the process. And I feel I'm really profoundly learning the importance and the power of leaning into that not knowing. That's been a huge theme for me, taking a lot of risks to show up in ways that I'm afraid to. I mean, even this again, like I'm just like, all my life I've been deathly afraid of being in the public eye. But doing things like this and leaning into the unknown of like, what is the experience going to be? I don't know. Let's just see what happens and see how I feel going through it. And, I don't need to know what's going to happen 6 months from now. I just need to know what's happening right now. And then as I become more aware of what's happening right now, the path just unfolds. And it just feels more and more natural. It feels more and more, it's like that irony of like the less control you feel, the more at peace you feel. I'm sure people have said it in much more graceful ways than that, but this idea of just like leaning into the unknowing and letting go of control, and from that comes clarity, which feels so counterintuitive to the ego and to all my previous notions of what life is all about. But that's something that I'm really leaning into right now, and I'm finding really profound transformation happening quickly.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like you're on the adventure of life.
Oh yeah, always on the adventure.
Yeah. And what resonates for me and what I'm feeling and the arc of your story is this like journey from stagnation, confusion into may not know where you're going, but you're awakening into who you are, and you're on the adventure of your life.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I was wondering if you in looking back on this conversation and how you're showing up today, what meaning do you make of this path that you're on? I guess we just kind of like tied a nice little bow on it, but if there's anything else you'd like to name.
Oh, it feels, yeah. I mean, I'll just reflect back how I'm feeling right now, which is that it feels amazing to this whole time just sit with whatever uncomfortableness was coming up and just lean into the conversation. And, being able to have enough spaciousness for both. I had been, when you had asked me to do this, there was definitely some dread that came up because I had a lot of fear. I was like, oh man, Josh always comes very strong with these things, and like, am I going to be able to advocate for myself with this? And I feel very at peace with the way that I've met myself and met myself each step of the process of getting to this conversation and through the conversation. And so I feel very grateful to be here, and grateful that you asked me to join you. And I feel a lot more love for myself than I did before.
Wow.
It feels really nice.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And also I'm honoring your dread. And I do have a tendency of coming on strong sometimes. So I'm really grateful for your flexibility and openness to this. And
go
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to share. I feel grateful that I'm able to sit with your energy as well a lot better than I used to. I think that used to be very overwhelming for me.
Well, I think I've also learned to temper my energy. So
yeah, I can't take all the credit. Definitely.
You can take a lot of the credit, though. If anyone listening is moving through their own rupture, what would you like them to do?
Oh man, the first thing that stands out to me is lean into the darkness. There's a lot to learn from the darkness. If you're feeling disoriented and confused, it's counter to what most of society would say. It's a great place to be. Just try to sit with it, get some support, and yeah, that's where the real work is.
Yeah, I love that, and it brings to mind a quote from Francis Weller, who wrote a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, which was a pivotal book for me, Invitation into Grief. And he says, the deeper the sorrow, the greater the joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I resonate with that so much. Yeah.
Thank you for showing up today, Sungil. I deeply appreciate your courage and presence in all that you shared. Let's take a breath together as we close.
I'm
checking out with gratitude, excitement, and just feeling deeply honored to hold space for your story. And yeah, just that you're my friend, my brother, and we're on this path together.
Yeah. Thank you so much for holding this space, Joshua. This was really amazing.
In a couple of words, how are you leaving the space today?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is authentically empowered and grateful.
Thank you again for joining us in this circle of ruptures and roots. These stories remind us that rupture isn't the end. It's where roots begin to reach once more for life. If this conversation touched something in you, then I invite you to sit with it, let it ripple, and maybe share it with someone who might also feel the resonance. If you are called to help sustain this work and deepen in community with your fellow travelers, you can support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/sanctuary of shatterings. Your presence there helps tend the fire that keeps this circle alive. Until next time, may you find nourishment in the roots beneath you and courage in the ruptures that open your path.